In this video, I want to go over the next bigger number with the same digits on Codewars. And what it's going to do is it's going to give us a number, say for example 12, and with the same digits in 12, we need to arrange it in such a way that we find the next bigger number. So take for example 2017, what we would do is we would arrange it until it's 2071. We could make 7,102, and that would be bigger than 2017, but it's not the next biggest number, if that makes sense. Now, there are a couple different situations in which we wouldn't be able to find the next bigger number. One of which is if they give us a single digit number, there's no way to arrange, say, for example, 9 in such a way that we find the next bigger number. If the number they give us is in descending order, there's also no way to arrange it to get a bigger number. Now, there is a 4-step algorithm to solve this problem, and I'm going to show you that with the number 4,369,875. Now, step 1 is we're going to start from the rightmost digit, so in this case 5, and we're going to iterate to the left until we find a number that is smaller than the number before it. So let's start with 5. We go to 7. 7 is greater than 5, so that doesn't work. 8 is greater than 7. 9 is greater than 8, but 6 is less than 9. So we're going to mark this number right here. Step 1 is complete. For step 2, we're going to iterate from the number we just found rightwards until we find the next greatest integer. So 6 is greater than 9, but it's not the next greatest. 8 is greater than 6, but it's not the next greatest. 7 is actually the next greatest number. So we're going to underline this. Once we have found these two numbers, what we need to do is we need to swap them. So I'm going to swap it right here and write 7. Sorry, excuse my handwriting. It's kind of hard to write on this. And 6. And then we will write the remainder of this array. Okay. Once we've done that, what we need to do is we need to sort from one position. So say we found 6, we need to sort from one position in front of 6 all the way to the very end. So from 9 onwards, we need to sort in ascending order. So this would be 5, 6, 8, 9, and then the numbers before that will be 4, 3, 7. And that's it. We have found the next greatest number. And in the next section of this tutorial, we're going to actually create this with code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take this integer n and we're going to want to convert it into a list of integers because integers by themselves are not iteratable. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a list of numbers called number, and we're going to use list comprehension. We're just going to say int I for I in string in. Okay, we have a list of integers. Next, what we need to do is we need to take care of every possible scenario that we can't create the next biggest number. So if the length of number is equal to 1, or if it is sorted in descending order, we can't create the next biggest number. So if number is equal to sorted, we'll say number in reverse is equal to true. Okay, we've taken care of all those possible situations. Next from here, what we need to do is we need to start our 4-step process for our algorithm, and we're going to start with this one. From the rightmost digit, find the first digit k that is smaller than the digit in front of it. So we're going to start iterating from the very rightmost element, and we're going to do that by saying for I in range of the length of number minus 1, length of number minus 1, we're going to go down to 0, and the step will be -1. Okay. So what we want to do from here is we want to check to see if the current element we are on is greater than the number right behind it. So we're just going to say if number of I is greater than number of I minus 1, what we want to do is we want to mark that position. So we need to create another variable, and we'll call it position. We'll put it down here. So we'll put it right here. So we're just going to say position, and this is going to be the variable that keeps track of the index of what we're looking for here. So we're just going to say position is equal to the length. We're going to initialize it with the index of the very last element. So the length of number minus 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to update this position variable. So position minus equals 1 to that element, and then we're going to break out of this for loop. However, if this isn't the case, we still need to subtract 1 from it because we're moving to the next element. So we're just going to say position minus equals 1. Okay, we've done that. From here, we want to iterate from the position and find the next greatest integer. So we're going to say for I in range of the position, so from that position to the end of the list, so from position to the length of number, that is not a 4, okay. So what we want to do is, if the current element is greater than the element that we just found, so that's the index, so if number of I, so the current element, is greater than the element we just found, but there has to be a second test condition. It can't just be greater because we have to find the next greater. So we're going to create another variable, and we're going to call it next biggest. So we're going to create it up here. And we're just going to initialize it with infinity. So next biggest is equal to float infinity. So if this is the case, is the current element is greater than the element we found in the past. So if that's the case, and the current element, so number of I, is less than next biggest, so next biggest, I know I misspelled biggest to biggest, then we know that element so far is the next biggest. So what we need to do is we need to say set next biggest to that element, so next biggest is equal to that current element, and then we need to also save that index, because remember we need to swap those two elements, and we're going to do that with the position index and the next biggest counter index. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create yet another variable, and we're going to say next biggest counter. We're going to also initialize that to float infinity. Okay, so we're going to say next biggest counter is going to be equal to I, because I is the index of that position. Okay, we've done that. We found those two elements. Next we need to swap them, so I'm going to move these up here a little bit. I've moved them back a lot. In Python, there's a very easy swap. We could create a helper function, but this is already going to be a long tutorial. So in Python, there's a really easy way, and it looks like this. So the two elements we're trying to swap is number of position and the number of the next biggest counter. So next biggest counter. All we have to do is set it equal to the reverse of what we just wrote. So number of the next biggest counter comma number of position. Two elements are now swapped. Okay, so for the very last thing we need to do, we need to sort from k plus 1 to the end of the list. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to actually create a second list, and we are going to store the numbers we're going to store into it, or the numbers we need to sort. So we're going to create a list called number 2, and we're going to set it equal to number of the position plus 1 to the very end of the list. Now sorting is very easy. So number 2 dot sort. Those numbers are now sorted. Sorry about that. Those numbers are now sorted. What we need to do from here is we need to put those numbers, we need to replace those numbers in our original list. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to say for I in range of the length of the second list we just created, because that's how many elements we're going to be replacing. So the length of number 2. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to say from number I plus position plus 1 is equal to numbers 2 of I. Numbers 2 of I. So what we're doing is we're taking the very first element. So for the first iteration, we're taking the very first element that we just sorted and replacing it in our original number list in the position right in front of the place where we swap those two numbers. And the reason this works is because position plus 1 for the very first iteration of this for loop, it'll be 0, so it'll be in the position right in front, and that's where we're starting. And then when it's 1, it'll be 2 places in front of that position, and that works just like that. Okay, so we've done that. Okay, next what we need to do is, it's basically done. What we need to do is we need to return this as an integer. Right now it's a list of integers, so we're going to be using list comprehension, and we're going to create it into a list of strings. So we're just going to say number is equal to string x for x and number. And then what we're going to do is we need to convert this string into one string. So we can do that with the join function. We'll just say s is equal to dot join, and all this function does is it joins all the elements into one, with the delimiter being what we specify. I'm specifying no space, so it's just gonna put them all together. So number, and then yeah, so what we're going to do from here is we're just going to return that integer. We're going to convert it into an integer, and this should work. So test it. If length of number 1 is equal to true, invalid syntax, so let's go up here and see what it is. Length of number is equal to 1, or number equals true. Oh, sorry about that. I forgot to return -1, so we're just going to return -1, and this should work. Test passed, then we'll attempt it. Okay, all 150 passed. So that was the next biggest number with the same digits for KYU on Codewars. I hope that it was helpful. If it was, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in future tutorials.